They're not good enough to start. They're not even good enough to play. But they do talk a good game. So come join Lou and Jose from the sidelines where all the best sports discussions happen anyway. Welcome in to the Benchwarmers podcast.
Welcome into the program, everybody. I am Lou Ruggieri. That is Jose Ortiz, and this is the Benchwarmers podcast. Wherever, whenever, and however you happen to be listening, we appreciate you taking some time to spend it with us. We are going to try to make it worth your while. And what a show we have coming up for you. In the second hour, it's already time to get to the NBA. We have NBA news abound. There's signings, there's injuries, there was a draft. I don't know if anybody was paying attention to. We have a lot to talk about because the NBA, thankfully, is right around the corner. And we also have to look ahead to week 12? Are we at week 12? No, week 11.
No, we're looking ahead to week 12.
Week 12, yeah.
We just finished week 11.
It is it was week 11. God, this season's almost over. It's so sad. NFL week 12 picks, we have to review our week 11 picks and then go through our week 12 picks. A little bit later this hour, we're going to touch on, we have our favorite new game, although it's not a new game anymore, so I should probably stop saying that. Make No Mistake or Give Me a Break, which is our true-false segment. We make a series of statements and we react to them. And that's it. Yeah, that's all it is. Some news coming up with the NFL. Very interesting. And first, we have our top 5 news stories of the NFL, according to us. And you can follow those along week to week on the iHeartRadio podcasting app, which we are a loving part of. The newly formed Amazon podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, you name it, we're there. Basically, if you're listening to this podcast, you know where to find us already. But just in case you don't, there's some options. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all at the Benchwarmers Podcast. We're on Twitter at the BW Pod. Our email address is thebenchwarmerspodcast@yahoo.com. Benchwarmers with a Z for, as always, marketing purposes. And on to the show. Jose, top 5 news stories in the NFL. I'm just going to jump right into it. Steelers improved to 10-0, becoming only the 20th team in NFL history to start 10-0, which is crazy. And it's the first time any Steelers team has ever been that good for this long early on. I don't even know what to say about this. I mean, it was a win over the Jags, so I don't think anybody's really surprised. But I think we're surprised that they haven't lost any of their games yet. What do you think?
Yeah, it just feels like they've been kind of, if you can be an under the radar 10-0 team, that's kind of what it feels like. Everyone kind of was talking about the Packers earlier this season, or the Chiefs, or the Ravens, the Seahawks, and here the Steelers go, just continuing to chug away. And the game was easy. They easily won. And I think at this point, looking at how complete their team is, I think they have allowed the second fewest points in the NFL so far this season. They have a top 5 scoring offense. At this point, I'm ready to call them the best team in the NFL right now because they've earned it. Like I feel like I've been waiting for them to start not being as good, kind of waiting to fall out of love, as I been saying. And they just keep winning. And at some point, I have to respect them as a great team that has a really, really strong chance to win the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, they impressed me. It's funny because, a week after we saw the Packers kind of struggle to beat the Jaguars, the Steelers just put a beat down on the Jags. And I felt bad for them because Jake Luton, I think he threw 4 interceptions. Like it was a bad game for them. And, the Steelers offensively and defensively it's hard to find a hole in their game, and it feels like every week that Ben Roethlisberger is just finding a new receiver to kind of uncover and show us that the Steelers are the best at drafting wide receivers in the history of the NFL. Like Deontay Johnson all of a sudden was a superstar this week. I think he had 12 receptions for 111 yards. Chase Claypool, we already know about. McLeod is there. It's unbelievable the amount of weapons they have. James Conner is looking like he's kind of rounding into form nicely. And Ben is doing it quietly, like you're saying. I feel like that's part of the reason that this team is sort of flying under the radar is because Ben's numbers eye popping. They're not what Russell Wilson's were early on. They're not Patrick Mahomes. And it's just he just kind of does what he needs to do to win, and sometimes he relies on that defense to get it done. But
his numbers aren't bad though. I mean, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 101.4 quarterback rating. I do think that you're right about that though. His defense being so good, it kind of makes it seem like, well, if you didn't have that great defense, you wouldn't be 10-0, which is absolutely true. But still, it just talks about how good their team overall is, not necessarily how good their offense is, not necessarily how good Big Ben is, how good their team is from top to bottom. It's just really just they're just great everywhere. There's really no hole on their team. Yeah, and I want to. We could touch on it now, or maybe when we take a break and come back later. I want to kind of talk about Ben. Oh, you could just touch on it now. We'll get to our second story shortly. But thinking about Ben Roethlisberger, we were kind of talking off the air. Ben. If he wins, so there's two ways that this can go. This is either going to be the most infamous collapse in history if the Steelers don't win the Super Bowl, because I feel like now at 10-0, it's kind of like, well, of course they have to make it to the Super Bowl, don't they? Even though you have the Chiefs as an excuse. You have the Chiefs, who are the defending champs, as a great excuse, and Mahomes is playing like an MVP. But keep going. Yeah. But if it feels, it could set up to be sort of a Chargers Patriots, on that was it 06 team. Sounds right, yeah. The Chargers were 14-2, and then they got bounced by the Patriots, who were, I forget, I think they had 9 or 10 wins, and they bounced them in the divisional round. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Steelers. I mean, it's a different. It's kind of apples to oranges because the Chiefs are pretty stacked on both sides of the ball too. But the other thing is that if the Steelers somehow do go on to win, and Ben wins a third ring, I feel like that catapults him into another tier, and I'm not sure what that tier is, but I think it puts him above certainly everybody else in that draft class. Eli Manning being the most predominant, notable figure. I feel like Phillip Rivers, you could already say that he's better because Phillip Rivers might have better numbers in some categories, but he has 0 rings, so it's hard to give him that. But where does he fit then? First of all, do you agree with me? And second of all, where would you put him in, how high would you elevate him if he gets a third ring? Well, I'm not usually a person who, I try to not be the person who assigns Super Bowls to a quarterback. However, if he were to get a third Super Bowl ring, and especially if he wins like Super Bowl MVP, right? I think there has to be that. It can't just be, oh, he won something, but the defense carried. It can't be like Peyton Manning or even, let's say, Russell Wilson, his first when he won that Super Bowl. It's got to be like he was clearly the best player on the field. I think then you can start to talk about him maybe at the end of the top 10, early in the top 15 discussion. I have to really sit down and write a list. I don't, as of right now, I don't even, when I'm thinking about Big Ben all time, I don't even really consider him as I might not even put him top 20 like right now if I were just writing a list. That's my guess right now. I just don't see myself putting him top 20. Although if I sat down and wrote it out, maybe he would be there. I think if with another ring, he could maybe catapult. The problem with Big Ben, and as far as like ranking him high, at least for me, is his career numbers aren't there. And that's a big deal for me. He's never really been an MVP candidate. He's never been in that discussion as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, at least from my opinion. He's been a winner. He's been a guy who was a reliable, steady franchise quarterback, but not an elite Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers type, or Patrick Mahomes type. He's been kind of in that next grouping. And so that's why I think he probably, if he gets a third Super Bowl, plays well, maybe he's in that, 10 to 12 range, possibly. Yeah, I mean, all time he's at 59,000 passing yards. He has 387 touchdowns, 196 interceptions. Mm-hmm. He's 154, 71, and 1. So I mean, obviously, his completion percentage is 64.5%, and he's actually doing better than that this year. He's almost at 67%. Mm-hmm. And so
you know, as far as 3 rings, I mean that puts you in kind of a rarefied air because it's Terry Bradshaw, it's Troy Aikman, and Tom Brady obviously has double that, and Joe Montana. I mean that's pretty much it. Everybody else has got kind of two or less to their name, and so that's pretty good for him. And I just, granted, his first Super Bowl you could say was in spite of him that the Steelers won, but he did have, a game-saving tackle when Jerome Bettis fumbled the ball. So
yeah, he's been an important part of their team, and like I would compare him. We don't really talk a lot of baseball on this show, but I would kind of compare him to Derek Jeter in a way, where he's a championship level player, but there was never really one point in his career where you'd say, "Oh, he's a top 5 shortstop." I don't think, or his top 5 player in the game. He just is a consistently good player, and at the end of his career, his numbers are going to be impressive, but they're not going to be elite.
That's fair. And so the last thing I'll say about this, we'll see what happens. I mean, they have to win the title first to be a legitimate argument anyway. But the last thing I wanted to say before we move on to the second of our top 5 news stories is it relates to Jacksonville, and it's our stat of the week that I'm going to shoehorn in here because we're not going to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars at any other point during the game until they come up later when we're making picks. Our stat of the week actually is the one lone bright spot that the Jaguars can take away from this game, and that their rookie running back, James Robinson, he is the 5th undrafted rookie to score at least 1,000 yards from scrimmage. And in his 10th game, he is the fastest of that group to do so. So he's the fastest rookie undrafted running back to get 1,000 scrimmage yards. The only other people that have even gotten 1,000 that are undrafted running backs. Sorry, I'm stumbling on my words for a second. The only other people in that group are Clark Gaines back in 1976, Dominic Rhodes, remember, 2001,
yep.
LeGarrette Blount, 2010, and Philip Lindsay in 2018. And with 1,011 scrimmage yards, which is 762 rushing, 249 receiving, he's the fastest to ever do it. So Jacksonville, there's not a lot to be happy about, but at least you have a pretty good running back. Hopefully he stays around.
Yeah, James Robinson's been one of the best running backs in the NFL, not just on their team. So he's been great, a great find for them, and he looks like he's got a bright future.
Yeah, so that's our stat of the week. Okay, moving on. Story number 2: the Colts. Those Colts edge out the Packers in overtime, and the Packers were up 28-14 at one point, and then they just lost. I don't know.
It's so hard to explain.
Yeah,
it's so
maddening.
They scored 3 points basically for the rest of they had 28 points at halftime and scored 3 points the rest of the way. And the only thing you can really point to is 2 interceptions by Aaron Rodgers, and then the fumble by Marquez Valdes-Scantling in overtime. The Colts won the turnover battle, and that led to the victory because the Packers had every chance to win this game. The end of the end of the game with the Colts, they just kept. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen more holding calls called in a short period of time than that game. It had to be like 7 holding calls in like a 5-minute stretch, and the Packers just like, we don't want to win this game. It's okay. No, thank you, guys. You take this one. This one.
Very, very strange. Aaron Rodgers, 1 interception. 3 touchdowns, by the way.
Oh, I thought it was 2. Okay, my fault. Yep.
But yeah, Scandling did fumble, so I think that was part of the issue there. So interesting that it feels funny to say this, but it seems like the Colts actually contained Devontae Adams to only 7 receptions for 106 yards and a touchdown because he's been far and away the number and only number 1 receiver on the Packers, and the only person that Aaron Rodgers looks to. And I don't know what to make of the Packers. It just seems like whenever they just get pushed around, it feels like a lot. And they're very finesse oriented. And I think that, the Colts have a stout, probably one of the best offensive lines in football, and they have a good defense. And it just feels like the Packers kind of just, they just get pushed around. That's the only way I can describe it. It's crazy.
Yeah, and the other turnover that Aaron Rodgers had was a fumble. That's why I thought he had two interceptions. He had a fumble, but I think that you're absolutely right. And the Colts know who they are. They're not a pretty team. They have to ugly it up to get a win, and that's what they did. They made the game ugly. They slowed it down. They put bodies on. They were hitting people, and that's how they got wins. I kind of think this was just an unfortunate loss. I fully believe that if Marquez Valdes-Scantling doesn't fumble, that the Packers probably just go down and score right in overtime there. It just felt like it had that type of momentum. So yeah. I'm gonna, they're still 7-3. This is just a loss. More of a big win for the Colts to me than it is a big loss for the Packers. I mean, the Packers are 3-3 in their last 6 games, have now fallen out of the number 1 seed, but I think the Colts have basically locked up. I mean, I don't want to say locked up, but they're sitting pretty in playoff position right now.
Yeah, and I think the big numbers from this game were that the rushing yard disparity. The Colts rushed for 140 total yards, and the Packers only rushed for 66. And there actually were 3 total fumbles lost by the Packers. So I mean, that right there.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that Indy, you were right, because Indy got hit with 8 penalties for 116 yards, while the Packers, I say only, but they got hit 7 penalties for 45 yards. But
the yardage is so much lower there.
Yeah. And the only other thing I can think of is that the Colts were 2 of 2 on 4th down, but it just seems like that the Packers don't really have they can't win any other way than sort of this run and gun thing.
They've got to blow you out. They're not winning close games. I kind of want to look at their schedule right now and just see what their record is in close games, because I can't imagine that they're winning these close nail biter type games.
Yeah,
where every snap counts.
Right. No, I agree. I think that's exactly right. And it's funny how both teams are now 7-3, but it feels very different. It feels like the Colts are ascending and the Packers are descending. And actually, this knocked the Packers out of the number 1 seed. The Saints are now lone owners of that spot at 8-2, which. We'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens. But okay, story number 3 in our top 5 news stories of the week: the Titans. Somewhat shockingly, I don't know. I feel like this felt like it was a bigger surprise than it should have been for some people.
You picked the Titans, so
yeah. I thought that the Titans are a better team all around. They beat the Ravens in overtime. This was Derrick Henry yet again in his, I think, 2nd overtime touchdown. Just unbelievable. I mean, Derrick Henry is just a beast. He looks like Eric Dickerson out there, just beating people into the ground. And the Titans, I mean, aside from Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, I have to make an apology, because I made a joke earlier in the year about how the Titans no one knows any receivers on anybody other than Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. And A.J. Brown, you have my utmost apologies, because he made a play where I thought that he was tackled, and then all of a sudden he bowled through I don't know how many would-be tacklers and just bull rush somebody into the end zone. And I thought that he was tackled 3 times. I was like, they're calling touchdown. I was like, there's no way he was on the ground like 4 yards ago. What are you talking about? And the replay just unbelievable physicality. And so my apologies to you, A.J. Brown. You are a true superstar. Good job.
I don't really have a lot to say about this game other than, yes, first of all, A.J. Brown's amazing. He's so good. But just for the Ravens side, I just think people keep waiting for the old Ravens to show up, because I'm starting to wonder if Lamar Jackson is hurt or something, because he's just not the same. I'm looking at his numbers. His yards per carry, is he not fast anymore? Like, what happened? He's not running the way he used to run. He's not getting the rushing yards that he used to get, and it's just very surprising. I don't understand what has happened to him.
I mean, I feel like a broken record because I keep saying this, but it feels like Lamar Jackson might just be a one-trick pony at this point. And he throws the ball to Mark Andrews, which we saw yet again, 5 receptions, 96 yards and a touchdown. He did run the ball. He had 13 carries, but he only had 51 yards.
Yeah, exactly. His yards per
completion
carry is
percentage
gone.
is not good at all. I mean, it was 17 of 29. That's for 186 yards for with a touchdown and kind of a bad interception. And just it feels like the Ravens don't they had their flash in the pan last year, and everyone was taking they took the league by storm with his quickness, but it feels like after having some tape on him, defensive coordinators are just figuring out how to contain him a little better. And I don't, he has to now counter with something else, and that something else needs to be, higher completion percentage of passing, or better decisions, or else he's in trouble of kind of getting pigeonholed into sort of that Colin Kaepernick tier of quarterback, where it's good but not great.
He needs to improve his deep ball accuracy. I don't know what the number is, but I can just use my eye test to see he's not completing deep passes. And what's happened, I think, is defenses have come up and they said, we're going to live with a deep pass. We're not going to let you gash us for these 35-yard runs you were killing us with last year. We're not, we're going to just, we know that you want to run the ball, and we know that you want to throw short. Now, I think also what's happened is that their running game, their running backs haven't been nearly as effective this year, and that's affected the entire offense. But Lamar Jackson's just not playing at the same speed. He had 1,200 yards rushing last year. We're already through 10 games, and they've played 10 games. He's got 575.
Yeah.
So he's not on pace for that.
That also could be coaching, where they don't want to put him in a position to get hit that much.
True. But so this is who you drafted.
Yeah.
This is who you drafted. You can't draft Steph Curry and say, I don't want him shooting threes, right?
True.
You have to play who you drafted.
But I think maybe it's just kind of a way to kind of get him to start passing more and running less, but his passing isn't improving. But speaking of passing, I will give a nice little shout out to Dez Bryant. It was nice to see him on the field after more than, I think, 1,000 days of not playing.
And the other thing with Dez Bryant is I feel like he threw his career away. He had a contract, I believe, and it's like, there's not enough money. And then no one signed him. It's like,
well, the Saints ended up trying to sign him for like a 1 year,
right. He hurt
minimum
himself.
deal,
right.
And then he tore his ACL. But
the
Ravens offered him, I think, a 3-year, like $21 million contract or something. At this point, he probably would have jumped at. But it was nice to see him out there. He looked in shape. He's always been kind of a big dude. He had some speed to him, which I was surprised to see. He didn't do much for 4 receptions for 28 yards, but whatever. He didn't get hurt, so hopefully he makes a difference on that Ravens offense. But we'll see. I don't know. It might be time to panic in Baltimore.
It's absolutely time to panic in Baltimore, because they're now on the outside looking in the playoffs, and they get the Steelers on Thursday. You can't. That's just not, because now you're in a position where you're going to lose another game, possibly. I don't know. That's just
that is
scary.
Not something to be thankful for.
No, it is not.
Baltimore fan on Thursday. All right. Story number 4 in our top 5 news stories of the week. The Titans. We just talked about the Chiefs. Rather, Chiefs hold off the Raiders in a very almost surprisingly good game. They improved to 9-1. And more or less, it looks like they're going to win the AFC West, which isn't going to surprise anybody. They split with the Raiders, but they are now well ahead of pretty much everybody in that division. And this game, I kind of expected the Chiefs to come in and just put a beat down on the Raiders, not Ravens. I don't know why I'm stuck on the Ravens for some reason. And it was a good game. They won 35-31. It came down to the wire. I was actually most impressed with Derek Carr of all people. I thought he made some good decisions. Obviously, that last interception he made was kind of a hope and a prayer, I think. But overall, he seemed like he has more command of the offense. He's using the weapons that he has, and Darren Waller being maybe the second best tight end in the league right now, with George Kittle being out. Second to only
Travis Kelce.
Well, I was going to say second to only the other guy on the other side of the field this week, with Travis Kelce, but. Derek Carr's making use of what he has. Nelson Aguilar, the renaissance continues. I mean, my God, he was a punchline in Philadelphia, and now all of a sudden he looks like a superstar with the Raiders. I don't know. I was impressed. I thought, you can't. I understand there's no such thing as a good loss, but I feel like the Raiders, at 6-4, can feel like, hey, we split with the best team in the NFL right now.
Yeah, absolutely. The Derek Carr has really impressed me this season. I don't have his numbers right in front of me, but I don't even really need to see them. He's been one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL this season, and it just when. I remember in the offseason, you and I were talking about like, who is Derek Carr? He was kind of one of these quarterbacks that were kind of in a prove it year, where like we don't really know, is he the future? Is he not the future? And he looks like he's the real deal. It looks like the Raiders can kind of build around him. I don't know if I would re-sign him to some mega deal or anything like that, but it looks like the Raiders can. I mean, they do have the Chiefs in the same division with them, so that's unfortunate. But it looks like they can at least start to build this team knowing that they have a competent quarterback at the position. Now, I will caution Raiders fans. Last year, the Raiders were 6-4 through 10 games, and they proceeded to lose 4 consecutive. So, you got to keep it going. But so far, so good. And the Chiefs, what else can you say? They're an amazing team. They're going to be going deep into the playoffs. Really, the Chiefs and the Steelers are by themselves at the top of the AFC, and there's a wide gap to me between, second and third. So, Chiefs are great. Mahomes is amazing. I'm not really sure what else to say about them.
I mean, that's it. He's getting to that level of, if he gets the ball with 2 minutes to go, it almost feels like it's a game over.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I will say is that they need to improve that defense. They need to be able to get stops more consistently than they do.
Yeah, and they have a guy, I think Josh Breland is his name, and he's been getting penalized left and right, and it certainly looks like it's becoming a problem. But they're close. They're close on defense, but I feel like you're right. They need to kind of get it together a little bit more. But yeah, the Chiefs are the Chiefs.
Yep.
Story number 5 in our top 5 news stories of the week, and this, I mean, it's a news story because the Cowboys. Well, it's twofold. The Cowboys and Washington both won this week in a very kind of surprising fashion, and the Cowboys in particular over the Vikings, which is ridiculously crazy. There's basically a 4-way tie for first place in the NFC East, and it's funny that, well, I guess it's a 3-way tie, right? Because the Eagles, with their one loss, are sort of in
the one tie.
Yeah, the one tie is sort of a win at this point.
Yeah.
And
well, I say it's a 4-way tie just because of the amount of wins. Yes, at the end of the season, though, I would not be surprised if it comes down to a tie at the end.
Yeah, 3-6-1. The Eagles are technically in the the lead of that division, and I mean this. I don't know. I heard a rumor over the weekend that the NFL has like a COVID contingency plan for playoff seeding if things get really bad, and what they are rumored to do or thinking about doing is they might take, instead of having 7 teams slated for playoffs, they're going to take the top 8 teams in both divisions and just seed them according to winning percentage, which I think is a much better setup, especially when you consider the NFC East. Like, there's no reason that the Eagles, Giants, Cowboys, or Washington should be hosting a game that's going to be, against the Buccaneers or the Cardinals, or a team with a much better record, just by virtue of having the division being won. And I think it's ridiculous. I mean, we've seen this happen where, the Saints most notably did it with the Beastquake game, and the Seahawks did it against the Saints.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I'm very.
I will say I agree with you in this one instance, but overall, I am a fan of rewarding teams for winning their division, and you can't control how good or bad your division is. In this instance, it looks bad, right? It's like, oh, you're gonna have a 6-win team, because that's basically what it's going to be, a 5 or 6-win team,
right?
Hosting a playoff game, and that looks bad. But I would be hesitant to make any sort of permanent changes to that. I think. I don't know. I just think there's something fundamentally important about having the division winner get to host a playoff game.
Yeah, I feel like a prerequisite of being a division winner, it has to be that you have to have a winning. Well, you have to have a winning record in the division to win it, and if not, you just get bumped out of the playoffs. I think at minimum it should be a winning record to make the playoffs, regardless of division.
No, you're right, and that's a fair point. That's why I wouldn't be like,
because there's no reason
we're not going to get the game in Philadelphia this year. Who cares? Like, it's
there's no reason that a team who's going to potentially have 9 or 10 wins is going to get bounced from the playoffs, while a team who has maybe 6 is going to win. Get in. I don't know. I think that needs to go, but we'll see.
The last thing I would just say, I'm just curious because I don't know if you noticed how I worded it in our show doc here. I didn't say who was going to win this division.
Yeah.
I said who's going to not lose this division.
And I mean, I called this at week 1. I think I called it, and I said that one tie with the Eagles. I can see that either the Cowboys, and now it might be all of them. Everybody might be 8-8, and
great.
Well, I could. My prediction was 8-8, and then the Eagles were going to win with 8-7-1 as the record. But now that looks like a pipe dream. Even at this point, that's a lofty goal to set. So, yeah, it's just a bad division and it's bad football. But
I'm picking the Redskins. I'm back on my Redskins bandwagon. I was really impressed with their win this week. I know the Bengals had an unfortunate injury, which we'll talk about later.
Smith looks fantastic. Alex Smith looks good. The guy that they spent $70 million on a few years ago.
And they've got a number 1 receiver in Terry McLaurin. They've got a pretty good running back in Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick. They have they have a pretty good defense as well. They have some of the pieces in place to win a not that good division. So I'm going with the Redskins right now.
Yeah, I'm going to Washington
football team.
I would pick the Giants there because the Giants, while they they're better than their record says they are, and I know Bill Parcells would argue with me about that, but they're playing harder, they're in games, and the team seems to be responding to Matt Rule's rules, and they just look better, and despite not having Saquon there, Daniel Jones had his first ever back-to-back games without a turnover, which I thought was interesting. And he's getting better. They're all getting better, and I think that the Giants are going to make a run at the end here, kind of like the Dolphins did last year when they went on their little streak at the end. But we'll get into that and some more. But we have to take a break, and we're going to come back. We have a few more NFL news and notes to get to, and then we have to play our game Make No Mistake or Give Me a Break. And actually, we have to blow through our highlights and lowlights of the week and also our moral lesson that we learned. So we have a ton to get to. So let's take a break, and we'll come back right after this on the Benchwarmerz podcast.
If you're sick with COVID-19 or think you might have it, take steps to help protect other people from getting sick. Stay home except to get medical care. Call the doctor before visiting. Separate yourself from others who live with you. Wear a cloth face covering to protect others. Cover your coughs and sneezes with a tissue and clean your hands right away. Avoid sharing items with other people in your home. This includes things like towels and bedding. Be sure dishes are washed in hot water or the dishwasher before anyone else uses them. Stay aware of how you feel. If you start to have difficulty breathing or if you're worried about your health, call your doctor. For more tips, visit cdc.gov.
Welcome back to the Benchwarmers podcast, where being all talk is actually a good thing. Now, back to the action. Or talk, I guess.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I am still Lou Ruggieri. That is still Jose Ortiz. And this is still the Benchwarmers podcast. Appreciate you taking some time to spend it with us. A lot to talk about in the upcoming hour. NBA is right around the corner. We have tons of NBA news to get to. We actually have to look ahead to week 12 in the NFL, make our picks, kind of look back on our week 11 picks, see how we did. We just touched on our top 5 news stories of the week in the NFL in week number 11. And now it's time we have a couple honorable mention stories, some news and notes, and we have to play Make No Mistake or Give Me a Break. So just, Jose, we have a lot to get to and not a lot of time to get to it. So we'll kind of just rattle through these. I want to get kind of a quick hit opinion on a couple outside the top 5 news stories, but certainly worth mentioning.
Okay.
Taysom Hill wins as a Saints quarterback, and he actually threw the ball, which was surprising.
Yeah, it was surprising that Jameis Winston actually didn't get the start, but Taysom Hill knows the system. He's been there. It was a little slow at first, but listen, they've got a solid team, and Taysom Hill got the job done. I think he looks like he's going to be set to keep going. So yeah,
impressive. What I thought was interesting, I think the one piece of advice that Drew Brees probably gave him that was good advice was, hey, if you're not sure, throw it to Michael Thomas.
Yeah,
because that seems like what Drew Brees does. Maybe that, and give it to the guy in the backfield because he's pretty good too. So, and
don't mess it up because you have an elite defense that is can keep you in games. So
yeah. All right, the Seahawks. This is going back a little ways. Seahawks beat the Cardinals on Thursday night. Kyler Murray looked like he got hurt his shoulder there, but the Seahawks back in first place. Surprised? Not surprised.
Well, I picked the Seahawks to win. They were at home. I had a feeling that this was going to be a bounce back game. They had kind of slowed down. I think this is going to be one of these divisions that comes down to the final week of the season. So not surprised. The Cards that you need Kyler Murray to be at 100%. He wasn't playing at the level that we've been seeing him this year, and the Cards are just not good enough to overcome that. So Seahawks got the win.
Yeah, and then finally the Dolphins. I don't even know what to happen. I'm gonna sneak ahead and give you a little sneak preview. This is my low light of the week. The Dolphins lost to Denver just when I and everybody else was getting on board with the Dolphins bandwagon, saying, "Oh my God, this is a real playoff team." They throw up a stinker of all teams. They beat the Rams. They beat the 49ers. They almost beat the Seahawks, and then the Denver Broncos. How does this happen?
I don't know. It's and just when I was apologizing to Brian Flores for for benching Ryan Fitzpatrick in favor of Tua, and then 2 games in or 3 games in, he gets benched. Yeah. Tua gets benched at the end of the in the fourth quarter in favor of Ryan Fitzpatrick. I don't know. Listen, these things happen. It's the NFL, week to week. You never know what's going to happen. But
yeah, as Chris Berman would say, that's why they play the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's all you can. That's all you can really say. It's just got clipped. It's unfortunate because now they're on the outside looking into the postseason, and they're going to have to get some big wins to kind of get back in postseason position. So.
Very curious to see who starting quarterback is for Miami next week.
Well, they already announced that Tua is going to be the starting quarterback going forward. That's why I don't understand what's the point of benching him then, unless he was hurt.
Well, it seemed like Bradley Chubb was just ruining his life in that game. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's just maybe he got hurt. Maybe he just who knows. I know he tweaked his ankle, so maybe they were a little worried about that because he has had some. I think he's had surgeries on both ankles actually in college. A couple other things. Very sad news. Joe Burrow. I mean, maybe this is good for him in the long run because he was getting beat up left and right. Torn MCL and ACL. Horrible injury. But as we've seen with some other guys in the league, not unrecoverable. It could be. I guess it could be worse. Could have been worse. So hopefully we'll see him in the 2021 season. But yeah, for now it's sad note for the Bengals.
Yeah, bright future, sad note. It's kind of a lost season for the Bengals. No Joe Mixon, he's on the IR too. Joe Burrow is out. Just got to regroup and try and get better next season.
And lastly, in the news, J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram for the Ravens both test positive for COVID-19, which means they're probably going to be out Thanksgiving night against the Steelers. Mark Ingram has been a shell of his former self this year, and alluding to back what we were talking about earlier in the show about how the Ravens their running game is lackluster is a compliment at this point.
Yeah, and J.K. Dobbins hasn't been overly impressive. I mean, he did have a pretty good game this past week, so it's a shame that he's going to end up probably missing this week because he's not going to have enough time to clear protocol. So I guess it's Gus Edwards to the rescue. We'll see what he can do. Any chance I had, I thought that they were going to beat the Steelers, which I don't think they are, but it definitely just got much less because Gus Edwards is not as good as J.K. Dobbins, and I think it's clear. So,
yeah, and that's going to be interesting against that defense. But all right, so now it's time to move on to our game. Make no mistake or give me a break. I'm going to make a series of 5 statements, and I'd like for you to tell me one of the two following things. Make no mistake, absolutely that's true. or give me a break. That's ridiculous. So without further ado, your first make no mistake or give me a break. 5 is the magic number of wins to top the NFC East.
I have to do some like schedule math or whatever, but I'm gonna say give me a break. I think it's 6. I know it's not. We're pulling hairs here, but I think it's 6. I think 5 is just. There's got to be a mathematical impossibility that you only win the division with 5 wins. I have to think that it's impossible for it to
not
happen.
When every team only has 3 wins through 11 weeks. It's not, but
they play each other.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna agree with you on that and say I think that it's gonna be 6 and or possibly even 7, but I think 7 is the cap. So I'm gonna say give me a break to 5, but it's not far off. All right. Make no mistake or give me a break. Staying with the NFC least, Jalen Hurts will be the Eagles starter before the end of the season and not due to injury to Carson Wentz.
I'm going to still stick with give me a break. We've had this discussion a couple times.
Yeah.
I am getting closer to saying that it's going to happen. I just feel like you've paid Carson Wentz too much money to give up on it right now, and you're still tied for first place, technically speaking. So I'm just going to say, give me a break.
I'm going to say, make no mistake here. I think that if the Eagles fall out of it a little more, if Carson Wentz has another multi-interception game, I mean, Philly fans are notoriously just the worst people in the world, and they're just going to skewer Carson Wentz alive. And fair or not, he's going to get the brunt of the blame for their failings. And yeah. I think that there's going to be an outcry for Jalen Hurts. And, I don't think that Jalen Hurts is going to be their savior, at least not this season. But I think that before the year is over, I think Jalen Hurts gets a start.
Yeah, I would. Certainly if they're out of it by the end of it, yeah, then they could do that. I don't see any team in the NFC East pulling away. So
yeah. All right. Make no mistake or give me a break. A team with a top 5 defense will win the Super Bowl. And as of right now, the top 5 defenses in the NFL, I'll give them to you. Steelers, Colts, Rams, Bears, Ravens. So make no mistake or give me a break. A team with a top 5 defense will win the Super Bowl.
That's a tough one because I kind of expect the Chiefs to win, but I'm going to say make no mistake because I just said earlier this show that I think that the Steelers are the best team in the NFL right now, and I don't. Which means I think that they would beat the Chiefs in a neutral field, and they won't have to be in a neutral field because as long as they keep winning, or they're going to get a home game. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm going to say make no mistake.
I'm going to say give me a break only because the Saints and the Chiefs are both not on this list. Yeah. And I think one of them is at least going to make the Super Bowl, which means one of them is going to win the Super Bowl. But
wait, right. So you're saying that you don't? So you're saying that you think it's going to be Chiefs versus Saints in the Super Bowl?
Well, I mean, as of right now, I think that's how it's setting up.
Okay.
So we'll see. That's my sort of off the cuff Week 11 prediction. But
okay, that's fine.
All right. Lastly, the Steelers will go 16-0.
Give me a break. I was actually looking at their schedule. They have a game against the Colts. They have a game against the Bills. I think they have another. They obviously they have the Ravens this week. They have the Browns later in the season. I think at least one of those teams will clip them, and they'll either be 15-1 or 14-2.
I agree. I think somewhere along the line they're going to stumble, and I'm not sure. I mean, we saw it against the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Teams, and it's just so hard to go 16-0 as we've seen.
Yeah.
One team has ever done it. So,
yep.
I lied. There's one more. Last one. Make no mistake or give me a break. Staying in the AFC North, the Ravens will miss the playoffs this year.
Make no mistake, they're going to lose on Thursday to the Steelers.
The Steelers, yeah.
So now they're already, I believe, the number 8 or 9 seed in the playoffs right now. So if they lose, they're going to be. I don't even know what's going to happen to their playoff position. It's just there's no way. I don't see any way that they make the playoffs. They are the number 8 seed. They lose, they're gonna drop to. They're just no way. No way they make the playoffs.
I unfortunately I also agree. Make no mistake, because the Steelers are 10-0, so it looks like they're going to run away with the division. But the Browns are 7-3, and the Ravens are 6-4. I mean, if the Steelers make it in, the Browns get a wild card spot. I mean, that's going to be tough for the Ravens to find a way in there with those two teams being that good this far into the season. So yeah, I think the Ravens are going to be watching the playoffs from the sidelines this year.
I mean, the only thing I'm looking at is that currently right now the Raiders are the number 7 seed. So there is a world in which the Raiders kind of fall off, and then the Ravens kind of jump back in. But they also have to compete with the Miami Dolphins as well, who are kind of tied with the same record. So
yeah, and I think right now, I think I would say the Dolphins look like a better team.
I think the Raiders look like a better team as well. So
the Raiders for sure, but the Dolphins, it just seems like such a crazy thing after. You remember at the beginning of last year, game 1 last season, the Ravens blew out the Dolphins. Like, it was some obscene score. I think they scored 50 points on them. And it's just funny how a year and a half later, how things change. But
the NFL for you.
The NFL, exactly. So any given Sunday. All right. So that'll do it for Make No Mistake or Give Me a Break. Our highlight and low light of the week, if we want to just touch on them quickly. I already gave you my low light of the week, which was the Dolphins, the aforementioned Dolphins, losing shockingly to the pathetic Denver Broncos. My highlight of the week was actually the Panthers. Even though they only beat the Lions, they beat the Lions without their starting quarterback and starting running back. So Teddy Bridgewater and Christian McCaffrey both on the sidelines. PJ Walker and Mike Davis showing up big, and I have some weird affinity for PJ Walker. He's the one guy I gravitated to when the XFL was a thing. He was like going to be the MVP of the XFL. For the Houston Roughnecks, I think was the team. And I like watching him play. He's quick. He's got fight. He reminds me of who does he remind me of? Another Panther, Steve Smith. He reminds me of Steve Smith was a quarterback. He'd be PJ Walker. He's tough. He's little, but he's got a lot of fight in him, and I like watching him play, and I was really happy to see him get his first win in the NFL this year.
That was a pretty impressive performance by the Panthers. They really completely shut down that offense, although they were without
out
Kenny Golladay and were without DeAndre Swift. But my highlight of the week is Justin Herbert. He's just amazing. 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. This is from game 2 as well, because he wasn't the starter for week 1. 104.7 quarterback rating. He looks legit. He looks like a legit franchise quarterback. Was great again this week against the Jets. So 366 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. I just don't really know what else to say about him. We've been talking about how good he's been for a while now, and it just feels like every week he looks better than I remember him looking the last time I saw him. And then you consider that the Chargers, they've lost 7 games by 1 score. That's the type of thing that can turn around next season when you have a more experienced quarterback. The Chargers are a team that I think really could take a big step forward next season.
Yeah, and with the injury to Joe Burrow, I think Justin Herbert just sealed his lock for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also,
and my low light of the week is I just don't know how you lose to the Cowboys anymore. If you're the Vikings, I know you're a Cowboys fan, so there's no offense meant here.
No, by all means, offend.
If you're the Vikings, I know that it doesn't look like they have a chance to make the playoffs. But if they win the game that is a winnable game, and they went to 5-5, they would only be 1 game out of a playoff spot right now. 1 game out of a playoff spot at 5-5. It's an inexcusable loss. And I'm looking at the offense. Kirk Cousins didn't have any bad turnovers. I guess Dalvin Cook had a bad fumble, but their defense just gave it up. And I just don't understand how you let the Cowboys score on you like that. So basically,
yeah. I mean, that was a surprise. I would have definitely bet on the Vikings. I'm glad I didn't. But it was just. I mean, the Cowboys outrushed the Vikings, which is crazy because Zeke has not looked great this year, and Dalvin Cook has looked like a superstar. And they just, I don't know. It's
just a weird result. There's a couple like weird results this week. That's one. They have the Dolphins game. just a weird, even the Colts beating the Green Bay Packers are just very weird results this week.
Yeah, very strange. All right, so that leads us to our moral lesson of the week before we take a break and go to hour 2. This relates back to the Steelers, the aforementioned Steelers being 10-0. And the moral lesson is a superior man is modest in his speech, but exceeds in his actions. And the thing that made me think about this was hearing Mike Tomlin, after winning their 10th game in a row, saying, the only thing perfect about us is our record. And it just, I understand that you don't want to give anybody bulletin board material, but I mean, 10-0 is still a pretty good accomplishment in any season. And he could have taken that in a lot of different directions, and he just, put his head down and just said, we still got work to do. And I thought that was pretty impressive. So Mike Tomlin, I don't care. Mike Tomlin I would watch Mike Tomlin as a sportscaster right now. He could do
I'm a big fan of Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, he just talks in sound bites, and it's incredible. I wish I had that sort of ability to command a room like he does. But yeah, so that's our moral lesson of the week. All right, time for a break. We have to come back for hour number 2. We have a ton to get to. We already have to look ahead to week 12. We have to go over our week 11 picks, touch on our put your money where your mouth is, sports bet, how we did, good or bad. But coming up next, we have to talk about the NBA because it's right around the corner. The NBA is a month away, and that's pretty exciting. So stick around, and we'll deal with that and a little bit more on the Benchwarmerz podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Benchwarmers Podcast. Follow along with us on the Benchwarmers Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to review us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.